Hello and welcome to Faithfully Stampin' with Jennifer Helm. I am Jennifer Helm, the Faithful Stamper, and I'm an independent demonstrator with Stampin' Up! Today I am tackling a technique that is making the rounds with all my demonstrator friends right now. It's very popular and I decided I had to jump on the bandwagon too. I really thought this was going to be more complicated. This is the Pleated DSP technique. And it's not as complicated as it looks. If you get your score lines in the right place, you will be golden. So I'm going to walk you through it, give you some tips, and hopefully you'll give it a try and see what you think. So it's very simple. There's a small pleated panel on the front of the card. And then this one is a Get Well card. This is featuring the Painted Lavender DSP that is in our new January to April catalog. You can check that out online at my website at thefaithfulstamper.stampinup.net if you are so inclined. And if you prefer a paper catalog like I do, you can get in touch with me and I would be happy to get one out in the mail to you. All right, so to start, we're going to start with what I consider the hard part first, and that's the scoring of the Designer Series paper. So you need a piece of Designer Series paper that is 4 inches tall and 7 inches wide. You will want a print that you can either do non-directional or just be mindful of how you, what print you're using. For example, we're going to be folding with the score lines vertically. And so when we fold it together, you can see here that my flowers are still running in the right direction. I'm going to show you in a sample how you can actually do it a little bit differently, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Okay, so 4 inches tall by 7 inches wide. And then what we're going to do is you need a scoring tool. It can either be our scoreboard or it can be our paper trimmer scorer. And that is what I'm going to use today to give you a little hint so you don't make the same mistake I did. But we are going to do, it's not a lot of scoring. It looks like a lot just because I wrote it really big so you can read it. You can take a screenshot if you like of this. I will be posting pictures on my Faithful Stamper Facebook page if you'd like to hop over there and check that out. Okay, so along the 7-inch side of the paper, we are going to start scoring. One thing to keep in mind, move that cutting blade out of the way so you don't accidentally cut part of the paper and then have to start over. But don't press too hard. It is thin paper, and I like to go back and forth twice, but without a lot of pressure, because if I start pressing, then I hear that paper kind of start to tear, and I get a little bit nervous. So, all right. So we're going to start at 1/2 inch, and just, I do back and forth with very light pressure. I'm going to slide on over to 1 inch, which is right under the edge of my guide here. Next, 2 inches. So we're jumping 1 inch this time. You will see a pattern start to form here with the lines. Now 2.5. Now 3.5. Then we're jumping back to 4 and 5. 5.5, and then 6.5. And one thing I wanted to point out, that was the 5.5 mark. I'll do my score line here before I forget. 6.5. And I stressed at the beginning, as long as your score lines are correct, this will fold like a dream. I encountered a couple of problems, and it took a couple cards, but I finally figured out what I was doing. So if you happen to have your paper trimmer scorer like this, here was what I did. Your 6.5 inch mark is here, but for some reason I had it in my head that it was this tick mark right here at the seam, and that's why the end of my paper wasn't coming out right. So just keep that in mind. Hopefully you won't be as oblivious as I was, but this is your 6.5 over here, and if you score on that line, everything's gonna come out perfectly. So that is all the scoring we're gonna do. So there's my scored paper. So what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna fold on my score lines. So I like to fold with my paper turned sideways. That way my lines are just running straight across. It's easier to fold that way. So I'm gonna fold the first small panel back. We're going to basically be folding left to right, or when you turn it, top to bottom. And you're just going to accordion fold this back and forth. So the next small line comes towards you. And if you've got a really busy print and you can't quite see what you're doing, turn it over and see if it's any better on the back. That may help you with your folding. So then I'm going to fold. I'm just going to keep on folding on my score lines. See here, I had to flip to the back so I could see what I was doing. But just accordion fold back and forth. Your last panel is going to fold towards you. And so when you're all done, everything is folded nicely. You're going to have one raw edge on the left, and then your last panel is going to be tucked under. So it looks kind of like this. But when you hold it in place and fold on all those lines, it's going to nicely line up. It'll lay flat once you glue it, but see, all your panels will be the same width. Now, if you screw up and do what I did on that last one, this is going to be smaller and it's going to look a little odd. So just keep that in mind. If this last panel looks a little funny, just check your score measurements. You probably did exactly what I did, and it's an easy fix on your next card. Okay. Another thing, I'll talk about this real quick before we start to gluing. I mentioned the different, using the paper. My trick with this card is, because the paper measures 7 inches, you can't use 6 by 6. There might be a way to do it. You just cut off the paper. I didn't have the brain cells to do that, so I used 12 by 12 that I cut down. So the first thing I did was I cut the width at 7, and then I cut 3 strips just like this from that 7 by 12 piece, and I made 4 of these cards at a time. 3 of them are going to be exactly like this one that you're going to see here, and we're going to finish in a minute. And then the other one uses the same paper, but I oriented it differently to just take advantage of the last chunk, because that last piece that you have left is going to be 5 inches wide by 12. So you can get another strip out of it. It's just going to come out like this with the print running in the opposite direction, but you know what I mean? So you can get 4 out of 1 piece of paper. You're going to have a little chunk left over. I'll talk more about that once we get into decorating the card, but it's a great way to use up a whole sheet of paper at a time, as long as you're mindful with your folding on that 4th card. Okay, so back to this one. So we've got everything folded. I like to stretch things out before I start gluing. You're going to flip so the back of the paper is facing up, facing you. What you need is some adhesive. You can use glue for this, but you're going to have to hold it for a bit longer so it sets. So you might not want to do that. You could honestly use tear and tape, or I recommend Stamp and Seal Plus. If you have a lighter adhesive, some of the more general tape runners, even Stamp and Seal, the regular Stamp and Seal, your paper doesn't want to stay folded. Some of your pleats are going to want to pop up. So a nice strong adhesive is what I recommend. Stamp and Seal Plus is great. The tear and tape would be good. You could use glue. If you find that any of your pleats are starting to pop, take a glue dot on the end of take your pick tool and just pop it in there where it wants to rise up and give it a press, and that should help keep those pleats down if you have that problem. I found once I started using the Stamp and Seal Plus instead of just the regular Stamp and Seal, I really didn't have a problem with my pleats wanting to come unfolded. All right, so here's the back, and the first thing we're going to do, we are going to put adhesive on all the small panels. So we've got panels that are 1/2 inch and ones that are an inch. So basically on every 1/2 inch panel, we're going to glue and then fold. So I'm going to start up here at the top. The trick is to make sure you get your glue close enough to the edge. You don't want it hanging over, but that it's going to catch and then fold and stay folded on both sides. So I've got that one. I'm going to skip this 1 inch panel. There's my 1/2 inch, and I'm just going to fold down and then move on to the next. You will find your own rhythm with like which direction of the paper you want to go in as far as ease of folding. Once you get started, it comes a little more naturally to you, I think, once you get your hands on the paper, and I think you'll see what I mean. All right, so I have this last 1 inch and then one more 1/2 inch panel. And definitely give this a good press. You could even use a bone folder if you wanted to. So now I have this smaller piece of paper, and it's not quite what I want, but the back is done. So you're going to have your 2 print from the front panels, and then the middle will be the reverse side. And that's what it should look like. Flip it over, and now you're gonna do the same thing. You're gonna put glue on your small 1-inch panels. So I'm gonna kind of flip it to the top again. Glue on the small panel and press down. And then I flip it to the next 1/2-inch panel and press. You have a little leeway if your glue is a little bit wider than your 1/2 inch because you are gluing it to that 1-inch panel. But I try to keep my glue as much as possible on that 1/2 inch just to try to cut down on mess and mistakes, because believe me, if there's a mistake to be made, I can make it. All right, so once they're all glued, you should have a panel that looks like this. Really, really cute. And honestly, not that hard if you get those score lines right. That's the one thing to really focus on, is your measurements for those scores. But then if you fold along the lines and do the gluing, piece of cake. Okay, so that's what it's gonna look like. So now let's go ahead and build our card. I have a card base in Gorgeous Grape. I stuck with the purples on this one to go with the Painted Lavender set. Let's see, this is gonna be the front of my card. Now, the next piece of this card is a layer. It can be whatever you want it to be. You just need a layer that's 5 1/4 by 4. It can be designer series paper that coordinates. It could be plain piece of cardstock. It could be embossed cardstock. Play around, have fun. Whatever works for your card is what you want to put here. This just fills up the space and gives you something visually to see that you can back your pleated panel with. So, all right. So this is that 5 1/4 by 4. This is just another piece of the designer series paper from the pack, that Painted Lavender pack. Next, I'm going to take a piece of cardstock. This is 4 1/2 by 3. This is going to be the backing for my pleated piece. And I'm going to tell you a little secret. I honestly think gluing this pleated panel to this page is probably the hardest thing you'll do. Because of the bumps on the back, it wants to fight you a little bit. Pardon. But really, it's not that difficult. You might just have to add a little glue. I like to add 1 extra strip. Normally I go around the edges, but because I've got these pleats and they're just tiny little bumps, I go diagonally across as well. And then I believe in my head that that is going to keep this from pulling off the paper. So center this on the cardstock, and you could use other designer series paper as well. You just don't want to get too busy with your patterns. But again, have fun. This is just kind of a springboard for you to use. And then next, you want to glue this to the front of the card. Now you have 2 options here. If you like, you can put this on dimensionals and put it on the front of the card. It'll give you an extra layer, or you can glue it flat, which is what I'm going to do. I wanted to save my dimension for my sentiment strip. There is a little bit of dimension. This is just thicker because it is the pleated panel, so you've got those folds. It's a little thicker than, say, a flat piece of paper, but it's not that thick. So it's up to you if you want the added dimension or not. And you can put this flat in the middle. You could put it off to one side. It's really up to you where you want to put it. I definitely wanted to put mine in the middle here. Pardon me. I hope nobody else has the crud that's going around and lasting forever. So to finish the front of the card, I'm going to take a strip of Highland Heather. This is a coordinating shade in the paper as well. And this is about 3/4 of an inch tall. I initially wanted a thinner strip, but my stamp wouldn't fit on it, so I opted for slightly wider at 3/4 of an inch. I have Gorgeous Grape ink and a sentiment stamp. The sets that I am using tonight are Charming Sentiments. I'm using the Hey There. It's a great sentiment set. All sorts of occasions covered there. And then this was in the Holiday Mini. I believe it carried forward. You can check on the website. It's So Sincere. And so Hope You're Feeling Better is what's going on the inside. So here, I'm just going to stamp in the center, like so. I'm going to set this to the side just for a minute since I've got my ink pad out. I might as well go ahead and finish the inside of my card. So for the inside of my card, I have a 5 1/4 by 4 piece of basic white. when I'm done, going to glue this coordinating strip of DSP, Designer Series paper, across the top. I mentioned earlier that 5x5 chunk that you're gonna have left over from if you make 4 cards out of one 12x12, you're gonna have a little piece left at the bottom. It's not big enough for an envelope flap, unfortunately, but it's perfect for cutting 1/2-inch strips and adding them to the tops or bottoms of your inserts for a card. So just something to keep in mind. I love using as much paper as possible and not wasting. There we go. All right, now close the ink. A little bit more adhesive here on this strip. I could put this across the top or the bottom. Sometimes I use 2 strips and I do both. Depends on the mood. And then this is gonna get glued inside the card. Now back to that sentiment strip. I am going to taper the edges kind of a little bit. Let's see. I don't want to trim off too much, but when I made one of these earlier, I did not trim off enough. So we'll see if I trimmed off enough here. Throw my scraps away. Oh, I did good. I wanted it to extend just slightly past the panel. Now I'm going to add this with dimensionals, and that will be the dimension to my card. So I'm just going to put one on either end here. I don't think I need one in the middle. If it was wider, perhaps, but I think I'm good there. And I could, again, put this at the top, at the bottom. I think I'm going to stick with the bottom. These butterflies are catching my eye, so I'm just debating. Oh, you know what? I'm going to go right here. I think that's good. You can still see those butterflies. Then to finish off, I have some of our beautiful purple fine shimmer gem. There's 3 different shades of purple here. And I think, let's see, I think I'll use the light colored ones here. And I just simply added 1 to each end of the banner where the little point was. Look at that, isn't that cute? I love it. So simple. And here you can see the different paper, but still the same effect and different placement. Both cards lovely. Now, one more thing I'm going to do. I happen to have a scrap from another piece of the paper. As I mentioned, that chunk that you're going to have left isn't quite long enough for your envelopes, but I did have this one handy. So to finish off this card and coordinate it, since I didn't have I didn't really have any images to stamp on this card, I am just using coordinating paper to put on my envelope flap. So I just glue like so. And I'm going to come in with my scissors and just trim right along my envelope flap. I love these peel and stick envelopes, so I don't have to lick the envelopes. There we go. Beautiful envelope flap, beautiful card, ready to mail or put in my stash for when I need to mail it to a special friend or recipient. Okay, so I have some more samples. The first one I'm going to show you, hopefully I didn't confuse you with what I was saying with 4 cards in one. The directions are the same. You just have to watch your print with the paper because it might not work on everything. But this is a slightly different print. But you can see all I did, I folded it the same. It's the same size. It's just turned sideways and I reoriented the card in the landscape orientation to make it work. So a really great way to use up a whole sheet of paper, get 4 cards out of it, and I'm ready to go here. Here I embossed my cardstock. I stamped my sentiment right on it first, then embossed, and then I made my layer a little bit smaller. This was 4.5 by 3, and I just cut it down to make it a more narrow border around the edge. And I did mention earlier, some of your pleats might want to come up. Can you see how some of these want to pull up just a little bit? I was trying to think, do I want to get glue in there? I don't want to pull it up with my tape runner now that I've got the card done. So I'm just pulling a glue dot off the roll with my take your pick tool. I'm going to stick this glue dot right under here, press it down, and now it's going to stay put. So Easy peasy. These little paper butterflies coordinate with the painted lavender set as well. So really, really beautiful, simple cards, and you can pull in whatever colors, mix and match very simply. Okay, I did stick with this paper for a little bit here. So here is another card. Actually, this is the same print as that initial card that I did here, which does not want to come over and play nice. So there you go. You can see that. Here, instead of a strip, I used a shape. This is one of our deckled circles. Again, the butterfly. I did keep the cardstock plain there. And there's my inside. So you really can mix and match and have a lot of fun creating cards with this, with what you have at home. Here is another one in the landscape orientation. I went purple on purple. I think I need another glue dot here. These are just starting to not behave. It was after I made these that I switched to my Stampin' Seal Plus. Here we go. But I love these butterflies, a little cup, some jewel accents. I love these purples. Purple's one of my favorite colors. All right, so then I stepped away from the purple and the lavender for just a minute, and I created this card. This is using some of our special items right now. January and February 2024, Stampin' Up! Runs a promotion called Celebration. And for every $50 or $100 that you spend from our annual catalog or the January to April catalog, you get to pick a special item from our Celebration brochure. And there's no limit. But this paper here is one of the items that you can get for $50, or there's a stamp set and this embossing folder. This is called Softly Sophisticated. That's one of the $100 choices. The paper is called Softly Stippled, and it does coordinate with a stamp and die bundle in the January to April catalog. And in a lot of the cases, for example, if I were to buy the stamp set and the die set bundled together, it's about $54, and I would automatically qualify for a free item, and so I could pick the coordinating paper. So that's just how Celebration works. You can check that out on the website. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch. Here, instead of a sentiment strip, I opted for the punch, which my stamp fit nicely on some heart pearls. And then the inside, this stamp is actually one of the stamp sets as well. It's from the stamp set that coordinates with this lovely embossing folder. And then from that same paper pack, a more subtle piece. So I went with a sympathy card for this. I added some ribbon. Here it's offset, it's not quite in the center. Same with this one, I skewed more towards the corner. It just worked better with the layout. Again, embossing folder behind. And then my inside. And then this last card I want to show you is the first one I made. I didn't want to use my good paper, so I figured I'd start with a scrap. So this designer series paper is retired, but the stamp set is not. But I just loved, I wanted to show you the bird. I'm a big fan of birds, wildlife, that kind of thing. Look how pretty that little bird is. He was very easy to fussy cut, and the perfect addition to my card there. Okay. So I hope you enjoyed learning how to make the pleated DSP technique card. As always, I'd love for you to subscribe to this YouTube channel. You can click the notification bell and receive a notification each time a new video is posted here. I try to do weekly most times. And I also share other videos and different things on my Facebook page if you feel like checking that out. I'd be happy to have you in that community there too. All right. Thank you so much for watching. Take care and happy crafting.